One of the most interesting things about brand alignment is that small shifts often create much bigger effects than people expect. A founder updates the messaging, clarifies the positioning, refines the visual identity, or perhaps improves the customer experience. And suddenly, things begin changing across the business. Marketing becomes easier, sales conversions become clearer, and the business starts attracting better fit clients. Momentum begins building, and I think of this as the domino effect of brand alignment. Imagine a long line of dominoes, maybe even taking up an entire stadium. And at first, nothing is moving. Everything feels stuck. But that movement of the first domino, when that first domino falls, it creates movement across the entire chain. One shift affects the next. And what's fascinating is that most businesses don't realize how interconnected all of those pieces actually are. They think of branding and marketing, sales, customer experience, and reputation as separate things. But they're not separate. They're all connected. And when one part becomes more aligned, it affects everything connected to it. That's why brand alignment can sometimes feel surprisingly emotional for founders because suddenly the business starts feeling coherent again. Things make sense and the messaging clicks. The visuals reflect the quality of the work and the business starts sounding like itself again. And people feel that shift almost immediately. So what's interesting about dominoes is that they don't fall on their own. Something has to create that first movement. And in business, that movement is often discomfort. A founder starts feeling disconnected from the brand. The business has evolved, but the outside representation hasn't. Maybe the company has become more premium. Maybe the work has become more strategic. Maybe the founder's own perspective has matured. But the brand still reflects an earlier stage of the journey. And that discomfort is usually the first sign that alignment needs attention. And ironically, that discomfort is often healthy because it means the business has grown. Usually, the first domino, the first domino itself is clarity. Clarity about what the business actually does best. Who's it actually for? What makes it different? What does it want to become? Once that becomes clear, the messaging improves. Once the messaging improves, marketing becomes more effective. And once marketing improves, better opportunities become appearing. The business begins attracting people who are aligned with the value it actually provides. That's the domino effect. I've seen businesses where one brand shift suddenly changes everything around it. Not because the business itself changed overnight, but because the perception finally aligned with the reality. The expertise was already there and the quality was already there. The business simply became easier to understand and trust. And that clarity creates momentum. And momentum in business is incredibly powerful because momentum changes energy. Momentum changes energy. I'll say that again. Because opportunities begin appearing more naturally, referrals increase, conversations becomes easier, and people start understanding the business more quickly. The founder feels more confident explaining what they do, and everything begins moving with less resistance. And what's interesting is that from the outside, people often assume the business suddenly changed overnight or became successful overnight. But usually that expertise was already there and alignment simply just made the value visible. So, for example, imagine two designers. Both are equally talented, both produce excellent work, but one designer presents themselves with clarity, their messaging is intentional, their portfolio communicates confidence, their positioning is focused. The other designer presents themselves vaguely. The work may be excellent, but the brand doesn't help people understand the value quickly. Over time, those differences compound, and not because one person is more talented, but because one brand creates momentum more effectively. That's the domino effect in action. So people sometimes assume branding is superficial because they only see the visual layer. But strong branding is really about alignment. It's about reducing friction, about helping people quickly understand the value of a business, helping perception match reality. And that's what allows momentum to build naturally. The most powerful part is that alignment compounds over time. Better messaging leads to better opportunities lead to stronger reputation. Stronger reputation leads to more visibility. One feeds into the next, and over time, businesses begin building momentum that feels much more natural and sustainable, all because that first domino moved. Often this natural growth cycles doesn't always involve tons of advertising if your brand alignment is done correctly. Brand alignment rarely changes just one thing, even if you only change one thing. It changes how the business communicates, how it's perceived, how it's confidently it positions itself, and how clearly people understand the value it provides. And that's why small shifts can create such large downstream effects because businesses are systems. And when alignment improves in one area, momentum begins moving through the entire system, like the first domino falling. And often that first shift isn't about becoming something new, it's about finally communicating clearly what the business has already become.